When I was teaching in Ossining at the middle school, my curriculum was simply backyard history or local history. And one of my themes was to try to get the kids out of school and get them into the streets to study architecture, to study a variety of things. The Hudson River, restoration of downtown Ossining was we were going through in the 1970s, 80s, even into the early 90s, going through some urban removal, urban renewal, whatever you wanted to call it. So the kids were always working on projects, et cetera. And one of the key times of the year, we took the kids on the Aqueduct in the spring and in the fall again. And we walked over a period of 5 school days, not successive, but throughout the year. We would take them from Croton all the way down to Van Cortlandt Park in Yonkers. Using buses, we would do 5 to 6 miles each trip. Lunch was planned. I had chaperones, of course, going with us, et cetera. And what I would do is I would teach that particular part of the aqueduct. Let's say the Tarrytown, Irvington, Dobbs Ferry portion. I would show them slides and show them photographs and teach them about that particular segment, whether it was the architecture, the social history, the Revolutionary War, what was going on during the war, Native American, whatever I could tie in chronologically to that particular piece. So I would pretty much hammer at them for about a week to 2 weeks. They took tremendous notes and we had lively discussions, and I could feel the energy building in the class. Again, we're talking about 130 kids over a school day, right, broken into about 6 classes. But I could start, and one of the exciting things for me as a teacher was to feel the energy growing, like, we want to go, we want to go, we want to see these things, because I was kind of teasing them over that 2-week period. Well, this is what you're going to see. I won't show you too much of it, but this is one of the things you're going to see. As far as the aqueduct itself, the trail, I'm not talking about buildings along both sides of the aqueduct, but what did the kids find fascinating from going from the classroom to actually getting off the bus, and getting their little hiking sticks and tying their sneakers and putting on their hats and their backpacks, and they had their lunch with them, and off we would go. They were interested in things like the stone sides of the aqueduct. The fact that John Jervis, who was the chief engineer, and his predominantly Irish workmen, put stones along the outside of the aqueduct. The aqueduct was built primarily of stone, cement, and brick, and then covered in earth, and then stones were laid on the sides of the aqueduct to prevent water from getting down into the aqueduct itself and to prevent erosion, etc. And the kids used to love the side walls of the aqueduct. And when they could, when I felt it wasn't too dangerous, I would let them actually crawl up and down along the side walls. And sometimes it got a little scary, like down at Sleepy Hollow Cemetery where it crosses the Sawmill River there. It's got to be 150 feet high. And there were times when, I'd say to the kids, okay, you can go up about 20 or 30 feet, but then you have to come back down because I don't want anyone getting hurt. They were so excited. They would scramble up and up they would go. And I'd have parents standing next to me going, Mr. Ochsner, do you think maybe this is a little too dangerous? And I would say, yes, it is, but I think they can handle it, and let's see how they do. And I must admit to you, those were nervous times. But when those kids, some of them, and some of those were challenged kids, when those kids would make it to the top of that, the side of that wall, to see the expressions on their face and to see the fact that they had done it, and here was this 1842 piece of architectural engineering history that was still there in their backyards. It was kind of exciting stuff. Another thing that the kids loved were the culverts, which were tunnels that were built by the engineers either underneath the aqueduct or over the top of the aqueduct. And the job of the culvert was to divert water from streams that were running from above the aqueduct down to below the aqueduct. So whenever there was a storm, whenever there was a freshet, whenever there was freezing in the spring from winter snow, the water would come pouring down over the top of the aqueduct. So the engineers had to make sure that that water was diverted or redirected so that it wouldn't actually hit the side of the aqueduct or the upper part of the aqueduct. We would have erosion, and the aqueduct would have collapsed. And of course, from 1842 until the 1950s, the Old Croton Aqueduct pretty much took care of the water needs of the city of New York. So it was a valuable resource for the city. Another thing that the kids, some of the culverts are so small that you can just put your hand through them. And of course, those are little culverts that probably run twice a year when there's a heavy rain. Then there were other culverts where you could actually walk through. You could actually drive your car through them. And the kids loved that. Mr. O, can we go through the culverts? And I used to say to them, when you're inside the culvert, be careful, but look at the stonework. Look at the incredible stonework that those engineers and artisans and stonemasons, what they did in 1842. I mean, you don't see work like that anymore. Okay? And a third thing that the kids loved in the aqueduct, especially loved, were the ventilators. The ventilators were put in each mile along the pathway of the aqueduct to allow fresh air and to relieve the water pressure inside the tube. And they're absolutely wonderful structures because they're made of different stone. The engineers chose whatever stone they found in whatever community they were. So when you're in Croton, it's kind of a granity, kind of a brownish stone. When you get into Ossining, you're dealing with limestone. It's called Sing Sing marble because much of it was quarried at Sing Sing prison. So you're dealing with more of a whitish color. When you get down around Yonkers and Hastings, it turns a dark brown, and that's called Tuckahoe marble, and it's just, again, a different color. So the ventilators were inserted one every mile, and the kids used to love when we would get to the ventilators. They would all crowd around the outside of the ventilator, and they would ask me, well, what number of ventilators, and how many miles have we walked so far? And look at this ventilator. And then we would usually choose a half a dozen boys and girls, and we would form like a human ladder, and we would have them hop up on shoulders, okay? Kind of like Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey, so that a few of them could actually climb right up to the top of the ventilator and then look down into the ventilator, down into the aqueduct, and they could then report to the rest of the group, well, this is what we see and this is what we don't see. So the ventilators were also a wonderful source of enthusiasm and excitement for the kids. Again, for my kids, most of them living in the village and town of Ossining, most of my seventh graders hadn't done any traveling. They didn't have automobiles. Most of them were low, middle, blue-collar, middle-class families. So taking the kids out of the classroom and getting them out into the field, out into Mother Nature was just an absolutely wonderful experience. And as I think I said before, I still get comments, letters, emails, Facebook, whatever, from former students talking about those kinds of experiences. So again, especially 13-year-old middle school kids, and today, I mean, to see some of the adults, and today when I do walks on the aqueduct and talk about the dams and the aqueduct and the water supply system, I average about 20 or 30 adults, and they come out with the same enthusiasm. And when I could take them up to see a ventilator, I have people in their 70s and 80s whose jaws drop to think that, wow, this was built in 1842, and how magnificent that these structures still survive, and that we have this wonderful history that still is truly in our backyard.